we won't, we'll be out of the supply chain challenges by the end of 2021. And so we all know how 2022 went. It did not happen quite as quickly. And in 2021, I was saying, yeah, no, 23, maybe 24. So we're on track with that. But I still want to hit it because it's one of those, if it happened once, it can happen again. So the things that we've learned from that, we really need to start applying now for when it happens next time, not if it happens next time. And I try to make this interactive, so interrupt, throw stuff at the screen. Well, throw it at the camera because I'll probably see that a lot better. Whatever it takes to get my attention, and we'll just sort of go back and forth.
Yeah, you'll
So
have to reshare your screen because I forgot to hit record. So you can share your screen again.
oh man, sure. Let's see, share screen. Which one did I say? Screen one and share. We good now? There it is.
We're good.
All right. So yeah, we'll talk about a little bit, like they say, the doom and gloom at this point is more of a recap than a forward challenge, but it lets you know what we did to get through it, lets you know what y'all need to know, and more importantly, what you need to tell management. And like I say, it's even though it's kind of, I won't say in the rear view, dwindling, getting into the rear view, it's still something that is a good object lesson for looking forward. And what started it all, and of course, COVID didn't help with all the folks not working at home or not working at all, not working in the office, wherever. But there were three major plant fires. And if you're conspiracy oriented, it's kind of coincidental that the three of them happened within a year and basically crippled the entire semiconductor industry. So that's, all y'all can make of that what you will, but yeah, in the Tobo fire, that's your printed circuit board substrates, the material that all our circuit boards are made out of. AKM makes 90% of the analog to digital converter ICs used in the world. Now, we're lucky we don't use them in any of our gear, but I know some of our competitors use them in a lot of their HD equipment, for example. So yeah, that slowed a lot of folks down. And then Renesas is another semiconductor manufacturer. So they're all getting back in, but of course, when you stop production for 6 months to a year, there's a big backlog built up to deal with, and that's where we ended up. So big old chip shortage. I'm pleased to announce that as of last week, for the first time since early 2020, we do not have a single part that I'm aware of that we cannot get. Now, I'll rephrase, single part for current production gear. There are still some of the legacy things that engineering has been tasked with finding subs for. So, and I think most of that, I know Chris and I talk about it on occasion about some of the stuff back there that we have to look at whether we can repair or whether replace is a better option. So definitely that's a challenge. It's getting better. We're seeing more chip plants opening up. I know they were building one in Texas, weren't they, Chris? And I'm going to have to make the screen. I'm going to say, I don't know if I heard of one being built down in that neck of the woods. I just don't know exactly where. But anyway, so that's kind of cool because anything that adds to industry, of course, definitely makes it a whole lot easier to get parts. The downside, the challenge to it is that also, there's a lead time. You don't just say we're going to build a plant and then start pumping out ICs tomorrow. So that's something else to think about. So lead times and prices have gone up because, I can tell you flat out, on average across the board, we are paying 17% more for everything that we use to build transmitters, from aluminum to semiconductors to circuit board to wire, all of it. And of course, the folks that buy from us regular have seen some of that reflected. Some of it we've absorbed, but it does have an impact. Lead times are another thing that they're starting. Okay, I'll give you an example. So this time last year, we were running 20 to 24 weeks on everything. was quoted lead time, and to be honest, we were missing most of them by about 4 weeks. So we were running 24 to 28 on average. This year, as of this morning, the VX low power, we're shelf stocking those, so they're basically shipping as ordered. I asked production, I said, how fast can I get this transmitter? And they go, how fast can you get me the money? So that's the lead time on those today, a year later. The bigger boxes, we're still out 12 to 16, 18 weeks, depending on some of them, and the high power AMs. Now I'll quantify. When I say high power AM, I mean 100 kilowatts and up. So not an issue in this part of the world, but those guys are still running around 7 or 8 months. So that just gives you an idea where we're at with it. Other challenges, what used to be, and I'll give you a great example, I shipped a transmitter to Michigan. Now, Halifax to Michigan, I can drive it in a day and a half. It took 2.5 weeks to get that transmitter to the customer and in the door. And a big chunk of that was not the Halifax to Michigan part, it was the Detroit to, in this case, Traverse City part. Finding a local carrier with the availability and the manpower that we trusted, and that's the key phrase, to get it delivered to the site. We've got a very short list of electronics movers that we trust to haul our gear off a truck and into your building without dropping it on its head. And we have had that happen enough that we're paranoid. So that's another thing we're seeing. And this is just an idea of what the trucking industry was seeing from a presentation that our logistics folks gave us last month. So here's what we're looking at for lead times. And this is why everything got slowed down so badly. And this is from a year ago. A lot of those are improved back to the normal, and now normal for most semiconductor manufacturers is 20 to 26 weeks anyway. So, we're not talking terribly. I mean, they're double lead times basically. Some of them were longer than that. But and Vishay, of course, if you use capacitors, almost all of them come from Vishay now. They own Cornell Dubelier. They own, I'm forgetting who the other one is. But they're about the biggest manufacturer of capacitors at the moment. Xilinx, ST Micro, of course, semiconductors, ON, NXP, Micron, all of them. So it's global. It's everywhere. And I say it's getting better, but it's not there yet. And this is where we get into what it means to y'all. It means that, has anybody had trouble ordering a tube recently? You don't get these stuff, you don't call IMAC and get a shelf stock 3CX 15,000 anymore.
What's a tube?
What's that?
What's a tube?
A GlowFat, hollow state technology.
Oh.
But those are another example. Okay, well, fans, fuses, blower belts for your air exchanger, whatever. There are all kinds of things that are been getting a little tighter, a little harder to get. I think we've tended to stock a lot more, but I know Kevin has invested an additional over and above what we already spent. We're dropping an extra $2 million a year on long-term purchasing and asset tax, just to make sure that we do have the parts. Chris is down there going, yeah, you didn't have what I needed when I needed it. So where this gets important is we got to stop doing radio station temporary, people. I'm hearing some chuckles and a CP, and I'm going to blame Chris a lot because he's in the front and he's easy to see on my screen. But I see you pointing at Amanda going, hey, I've done that. But yeah, I
think that's one of our pictures.
I think that's our photo that we took.
Yeah, Eric is on Zoom with it. I recognize it.
I told somebody once, I said, you got to be careful if you put anything on the internet and I'm anywhere nearby, I can guarantee you that it will show up.
Yep, that's my photo. And when we removed those vice grips, we found that actually it had been brazed together, and the vice grips were from the brazing exercise. So
that's cool. So I've got enough. I've got another one that I took in Wisconsin where the vice grips were holding the ground onto the isocoupler for the FM on the AM tower, and those vice grips were very much not holding a braze connection. They were the primary connection. Now, my favorite story is the AM, where I walked in one year and the vice grips were holding the copper feed line onto the tower because, I mean, the wind blows, those things break loose, and it happens. But I came back about 3 or 4 years later, and the vice grips were still there, but now they were aviation orange because he'd gotten the tower painted in the interim, and they just painted over the vice grips as well. Now, the good thing is they'll never rust now, right? But yeah, this is one of those things that, especially during COVID, everybody was rushing around, and we were spending so much time dealing with going from doing 2 or 3 remotes a week to doing 20 or 30 a day as we got every one of our hosts geared up to work from home, that a lot of things like site maintenance and periodic walkthroughs kind of got, I won't say omitted, but they got shuffled to the back burner pretty fast. So I know somebody asked, they go, how bad did COVID hit your business? And I said, well, it went down 10% in 2020, and it's been up 40% ever since, because all that stuff that got neglected during 2021 is now blowing up, and so now it's got to be replaced. The problem is when it takes 16 to 18 weeks to get a new transmitter, that's a couple of STA extensions. And, nobody likes to be off the air that long. So one of the big things, and I've beaten the drum on this, and I'm also one of the worst there is for it, although as you can see by the hen scratch, I'm trying to get better, is document. I am not an organized person. I love this thing, and I've promoted this book so much I probably should be getting stock in the company. But it's called an Everlast. It's made by a company called Rocketbook. And it's kind of cool. Let's see if I got a page in there with notes on it that I don't mind people seeing. Okay, well, there's some example of some testing we were doing with HD radio not too long ago in Idaho. But at the bottom of the page, it's got, I don't know if I can get my camera to focus on that. You can just barely see them above my finger. There's a series of icons. And as you shade in the icons, whatever you program the app to do in your cell phone, when you scan that page, it will do whatever that icon is meant to do. Like I could save stuff to, I use Evernote a lot because it's got OCR, text recognition. You can send it to an email. You can save it to OneDrive, whatever, a bunch of options. So it's really cool because with the Evernote and the OCR, I can take my notes like you see here, and then I can save the pictures in there as part of it, and then I can go in and search it. So I've got the ability to text search, and it will actually recognize my hen scratch. So I might see everywhere where I use the phrase bulkhead, or everywhere I usually reference everything by a call sign, so I can search that call sign and see what notes I took. Okay. And that comes down to, again, I'm not the organized guy. That's my wife. But she's the one that makes a checklist for everything. We're going on vacation. There's a checklist for us. There's a checklist for the boy. She'll break the one for us down into her stuff and my stuff. And, of course, my stuff gets ignored, and then I end up whining about it when we get there. But, I'm the guy. I've been traveling so long now that I grab all my stuff on the way out the door. And what do they say? There are 2 people, the ones who plan for vacation 3 months in advance, and the ones to get to the airport and go, okay, where are we going? And I'm the second one. Let's see. Okay, Eric mentions that Bear, and there's another good reason to leave that screen sharing on. So Bear is another good documentation tool. And that's a good note. What's Eric, if you don't mind turning your mic on, what's cool about Bear?
It's a broad spectrum tool. So not only can you make notes, you can draw things, you can capture screenshots, you can add PDFs into a document. And like you said with yours, it's completely searchable and taggable. So it makes it super easy to get everything into one place, including checklists, and then quickly find them again when you need them.
Very cool. So there's Bear and Evernote are the two. And I say the Rocketbook, I just use that because I can scan stuff straight into Evernote from the Rocketbook. That
The other
way
thing
it
I
can,
like about
yeah,
Bear is when you save things, they're available on your phone, your Mac, your
right.
Windows laptop machine. So whatever machine you happen to have with you, you can get access to the stuff.
And that kind of comes into another related but non, it's kind of off topic, but not. More and more, and I think just about everybody here these days, I assume we all use some form of cloud storage or another at some point. Like we're an Office 365 facility at Nautel, so I use OneDrive, both work and personal. And I've got Google Drive, and I've got one other one I can't remember. And all that means is that now I've just got a whole infinite universe to lose stuff in instead of just one hard drive. But when that hard drive crashes, I mean, last fall it was, my laptop had a heart attack on me. I walk into the office and I told the IT guys, said, laptop blew up. And they go, oh, well, you need a new one. They go, what do you need on it? And I said, well, I need Salesforce, our customer management system, and I need Jira, our engineering database, and that's it. And so they put those up, and within 20 minutes, I'm walking out. I logged into the new laptop and had access to every single file that I already had in the old laptop because they're all cloud-based. Now, it did take 2 days for the new laptop to synchronize the OneDrive accounts for local storage, but because, again, belt and braces, cloud-based is great until the backhoe cuts the fiber. So definitely, I said, have a backup, and we'll touch this a little later too, but have a backup and have a backup to the backup. But what the whole thing this gets to is talking about long-term planning. And I mean, I know like the folks at Crawford, I know y'all do scheduled life cycle replacement. I know a lot of folks tend to replace stuff when the smoke comes out of it. And when most manufacturers have shelf stock, that's fine. But when manufacturers are dealing with 5, 10, 15, 20, shoot, in some cases, I'm aware of one control surface manufacturer where you could be waiting upwards of a year to get all your gear. So, I think, again, that's improving, but it's going to take a while before we all get back to where everything's like it was before. And as much, okay, I'm cynical. I don't think the price of gas is ever going to go back to what it was before, and I don't think lead times are ever going to go completely back to what they were before. Some, yeah, some, no. So, so this is where we get into the best of the worst. And this is a site in Arkansas that I actually will be at again in about a month and a half. But beautiful grounding in the building. Everything's single point, everything nice coax entry ground, ferrites on the coax. Beautiful, just nicely laid out. They were losing a lot of PAs on a 50 kilowatt. And we walk outside, and I'm looking around, and I moved this bush and discovered what chiggers were at the same time. That's a whole different discussion. But anybody who doesn't know what chiggers are, I'd take ticks over chiggers, and that's saying something. But anyway, so that's what happened. The coax ended about 3 or 4 inches outside of the building. And if it doesn't go to ground, it's not going to do you much in a lightning storm. By the same token, and I got to get some new pictures because these ones are getting old, but they're just so entertaining. If you have your owner, like this was the one on the left was a 1 kilowatt. It was a the owner was the engineer, was the sales guy, was the secretary, was the accountant, and a buddy of his who's an electrician said, yeah, in a pinch, if you don't have a ground rod nearby, a cold water pipe will make a great ground connection. Didn't tell him it had to be conductive. So PVC cold water pipe, not such a great ground connection. The guy on the right, the guy in the foreground with the ball cap is the owner, and the guy behind him is his engineer. And we're brazing a ground rod at 9 or 10 p.m. in a mountain in Arkansas after somebody who looks a lot like me reached down, grabbed the ground cable, and stood up holding it in his hand. The owner said, I just tightened that 3 months ago. And I said, yeah, compression connection. Don't like them. So compression connections, everybody's heard this, but if you put a stranded copper wire in a compression connection, Unless you displace all of the air, that copper will deform because copper's malleable, and it will deform to displace air, and it'll become loose. It guaranteed, 100%. The only way to fix it is you put it on, come back a couple of days, tighten it up, come back a couple of weeks, tighten it up, come back a couple of months, tighten it up, then maybe come back a year after that and tighten it up. Or you make it a proper exothermic connection with a braze or a CAD weld. Love CAD welding. No, he's not brazing that to the plastic pipe, Eric. Totally different pictures taken about 20 years apart, but that was the first time anybody's asked that question. I appreciate it. So yeah, by all means, if you can make a CAD weld or again an exothermic connection of some sort, do it. If you have to use a compression connection, make very, very certain that you displace all the air and you come back a few times to tighten it up. Now, if you come back 3 or 4 weeks later and give it a crank and it doesn't move at all, you're probably good to go. But definitely don't assume that just because you tightened it up on install that it's going to stay that way for a while. By the same token, lugs, crimp lugs. I have a love-hate relationship with crimp lugs because almost nobody has the proper tool and die for the lugs they're using. You know, and like those automotive crimp lugs, they'll work fine for a low signal, a low voltage connection, although those will come loose on their own too. But when you're putting big volts on and you put a crimp lug on like a 2 or a 6 gauge wire, give you an example. The Amphenol or the Panduit crimp tool that we use for the big wires in the power transformer connections, that tool costs about $5,000 and is hydraulic. So you better have a 200 PSI compressor and that $5,000 tool and the $500 die for that specific lug, or you're not getting a proper connection. So, you know, it's not something most of us have in our toolbox. My personal preference when I got to use a lug, my personal preference for tools are a hammer and a MAP gas torch. You hammer it down as tight as you can and then braze it and call it a good day. Ain't pretty, but it'll work. I see Chris is just squirming there. He's like, no, don't do that. Get the proper gear. But let's see, skipping forward. So here's another site. This one's not too far east of y'all in Nebraska. I was out for the Nebraska Engineering Conference or their state convention. Oh, it was year before last, no, it might have been 22. Don't remember now. But I was out there and we happened to, they said, you want to go see a transmitter site? And I said, sure. Well, on the left, what you're looking at is the ground kit for the coax. And that wouldn't be so bad to see one dangling ground kit, except every single one of them was disconnected. I don't know why they were disconnected. The engineer didn't know why they were disconnected, but they were all disconnected. The middle one, that I shot a video. So don't know if the audio made it through, but basically this is me growling about compression connections again. What you're looking at there is the primary ground for that particular transmitter site. Fortunately, it didn't have any of my gear in it, so I'm less concerned about their failure rates, but I knew the engineer, so I sent him a copy of that video and said, hey, you know, you want to fix this. And over to the right is a phone company building with a CAD welded ground connection. Not a fan of the small diameter wire, but I am a big fan of the CAD weld points. So, you know, there are ways to do this stuff. And one of the big things, and this is a challenge, how many people have got at least one site that they've inherited? And, you know, it's just you walk in and you got what the guy before you did and the guy before him and the person before them and going back umpteen generations. And I'm not going to mention any 3-letter call signs in the Denver area, but I can think of one AM site that has had an evolution over the years with a lot of our gear going through it. And, you know, it's an ongoing challenge. And I mean, now I've seen, and I pick on KLZ, whoops, I did mention it, just because I know the amount of work you guys have done cleaning it up over the years. And it's been really fun to watch that happen. But And this one here, that is not KLE or KLZ, by the way. That's a station in Memphis. But yeah, cleaning the stuff up is huge, because if you don't know where the wires go, how do you know, where it makes it harder to troubleshoot anything. Lightning protection is even a bigger challenge, because you know how hard we beat on single point grounds. But how do you do single point grounding when you got copper going everywhere and you don't know what any of it connects to? So I tell people sometimes it's almost better to rip it out and start fresh. And that can be a challenge of its own. By the way, I talk about ferrites. Definitely use ferrites. Don't use them that way. This was a buddy of mine in Minneapolis. He was doing an install up in Duluth, and he sent me these pictures. And he said, "Hey, I put the ferrite on the on the hard line, like you said, and I grounded the surge box. We're good to go, right?" And then he sent me the pictures of it done right, but that had no comic relief to it. So, yeah, people, I got the reputation for being the guy that always talks about the ferrites, and I like ferrites. I think they're useful. But without proper grounding and properly installed surge protection, they're no good at all. They're not going to do anything on their own. In a properly grounded site with well installed surge protection, a ferrite can make a difference, because you're playing a voltage divider game between the antenna and the AC lines, and ground, of course. And everything we can do to raise the effective impedance of our gear just a little bit makes it a little less attractive for that energy. It's going to be a little less current going through it when bad stuff happens. Now, 2 pictures here, and I titled it Good Engineering Practices. This one on the left is a site in Kentucky, and I am 100% convinced that the engineer in that site was trying to commit suicide. Every electrical panel was wide open and uncovered. There was loose chunks of Schedule 90 conduit laying on the floor, just waiting to be stepped on. There were cabinet drawers opened, and it was just, it was scary. So by all means, sometimes you got to open this stuff up to work on it, but tidy it up when you're done. It just it makes it a whole lot easier for both short and long term and life expectancy. On the right, what you're looking at there is an entire studio's worth of electrical, all connected to that one yellow plug in the middle. Their entire studio, the engineer sent it to me and said, "Hey, I thought you'd like to see this." They asked me to rebuild this studio, so I took the old one apart, and as I start taking things off, and I realized that everything came back to this one outlet. So everything, the entire studio was running off one 15-amp wall outlet. Good thing we're not back in the days of reel-to-reel. That could have been a challenge. One of them big old reel-to-reel decks fires up. There's some current draw. But yeah, like I said, inheriting stuff comes with challenges. And this is one of those examples where, not having any documentation. Now, what I don't know, and he wasn't able to tell me, is what the 2 timer outlet or timer relays on the outlet boxes are doing. But yeah, that's just a prime example. Actually, I see 3 of them now that I look a little more carefully. So that's the kind of thing that, again, it's easy to evolve into. I'll give you an example. My house, the one I'm sitting in right now, is about 50 years old. The guy who built it originally built the basement and lived in that for 10 or 15 years while he built the house above it as he could afford to. And that's the key phrase, as he could afford to. So what it means is I've got an interesting collection of electrical wire ranging from 2-conductor cotton wrapped, which is pretty much all gone at this point, to proper 3-conductor THNN, the decent stuff, and a little bit of everything in between. And that's kind of what we run into at a lot of stations, where things get added or changed, or engineers come and go, and nobody tends to document much. I mean, my fuse panel, I've been in this house 17 years, and it's only been the last couple of weeks that I think I figured out where every single breaker, what every breaker is controlling. I hope. We'll find out someday, I'm sure. Have I mentioned documentation and cleaning things up? So, a little backstory. This is a site in Alabama, and I'll be there again in a couple of weeks. But I I took this picture. I was at the Alabama Broadcaster Show, and I did a session similar to this one. So I had these pictures up in it. And as I'm doing the talking about the good engineering practices and or the lack thereof, like you can't really see it, but if you look down, that's those legs belong to Dale Ladner from Shively, and if you look down by his left foot, just off his left foot, you'll see the power indicator for a power bar. We found it after we kicked the bundle of wire or by mistake and shut off 5 stations. Turns out there were 3 power bars in there, daisy chained. Anyway, so as I'm talking about this during this session in Alabama, I see this guy back in the audience kind of slinking down, and I kind of high speed it through these slides and go to the next page. And at the end of it, he comes up to me and he goes, "Thanks for not telling anybody those were my sites." Now, since then, he's he was at a point that was his older engineer had been getting ready to retire and was a little overwhelmed by the HD and didn't really like this newfangled stuff and just did what he had to do to get it on and stop the owner complaining about it. And anyway, so he got a new guy not too long ago, and he called me up to tell me, "Hey, you'll be happy to know this is all fixed now." So we've made an appointment for me to come out, and I'll have an after picture in a couple of weeks roughly. But yeah, just stuff like that makes it so much harder to troubleshoot anything, or to figure out what's going where, or to inadvertently take a whole bunch of stations down. In that rack, you're looking from top to bottom at a Harris Quest that's in service. Below that, a VS2.5 running as the main, and below that, 3 VS300s all running HD secondaries from the VS2.5. So again, 5 stations. 2 stations and no, because the 3 secondaries are all running translators. So yeah, 5 stations all in that one rack, and nobody knows where anything's connected. Well, they do now, but they didn't then. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the after picture. But this is one of those examples where it's just so easy to let this stuff get away and just, have to go in and troubleshoot this later. I mean, can you imagine being the engineer that walked in first day on the job, something went down out at the transmitter site, and you walk in and this is what you're looking at? And Amanda's looking going, "Hey, I've been that engineer." But yeah, it's an interesting challenge. Cable management is something that doesn't just happen inside either. This is a site in the upper Midwest somewhere, can't remember where now, but I know that the guy who owns it called me on it. He showed it one day. He goes, "Hey, that's my site." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "It's been fixed." But if you're in an area where the wind tends to blow hard, that's a lot more surface area than a bundle of cables. And that's a lot more potential problem, especially if in this one, it doesn't look like they had to worry about somebody taking it out with a mower. But, again, it just makes a whole lot easier if things kept tidy. Tidy enough that you can actually get to it, by the way. Top one is I think that might be the same site in Kentucky I was talking about before. Bottom one, in their defense, the bottom one is in a rainforest. It's basically American Samoa. I think Shane Tobin from EMF sent me that. And down there, that foliage will grow to that rate almost on a monthly basis. So weed control is a much bigger challenge for them than it is for us. I had a guy call me again in Alabama. A lot of my stories come from Alabama, seems like. But he called me and he said, "I got to go work on your transmitter." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "Well, it won't be today." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "You don't understand." He goes, I said, "What?" And he goes, "They put that transmitter in, and I don't think anybody's been there in the year and a half since." I said, "What makes you think that?" And he goes, "There was a tree growing in front of the door to the point we couldn't open the door." So a tree had grown up thick enough that the door was totally blocked. Unbelievable.
That doesn't take very long in Alabama, Jeff, I'll tell you that.
No, sir, it does not. And I know that transmitter only been there a couple of years. So yeah, I don't think it was, we weren't talking decades of neglect by any stretch. Now, I did run down into one in Arkansas where there were guy wires going through trees, like literally through the tree trunk. And the tree trunk was close to 4 or 5 inches in diameter. So
Yeah.
that didn't happen overnight, though. And the guy wire had nice, interesting, guy wires are supposed to go like this, not like that. So, that was an interesting little thing, too. He sent me a picture after he'd cut the tree off above and below the guy wire. So there was like a 6-inch log dangling off the wire. That was kind of cool. Kind of cool if it's not your site. The other thing I talk about a lot is airflow. And again, this is that guy in Arkansas that we saw brazing the ground system. This was the original install. They had the cold air blowing out at ceiling height and the cooler air coming back in the lower vent. And the reasoning was, well, that's how Bard does it. And if you put a Bard air conditioner in a transmitter site, just know right off the bat that your air handling is upside down. Because just about every broadcast transmitter on the planet exhausts the hot air out the roof. Not, I don't know all of them. The lower power ones, not so much, but the big boxes, absolutely. And they'll bring the cooler air in down below, whether front or back or a combination. So that's what he had. And the problem was that the gray box behind the black rack is a V5. What you're looking at the left is the air intake, and the air handling system has its warm air return down there, so it's pulling the air away from the transmitter. So the transmitter was so starved, it was running almost 40 degrees Celsius above ambient, and things were cooking. So we rerouted things to dump the cool air down behind the transmitter, and then plenum the hot air out the roof, drop the air temperature, the ambient temperature of the transmitter by almost 30 degrees. And that's Celsius degrees, so that's a whole lot more in Fahrenheit. 1.8 to ballpark 54 degrees roughly. He put the two big window units in where the original air handling system was just as backup, and to my knowledge, they've never turned on unless the main system's been taken down for maintenance. So, he put them in figuring he'd need them, and then proper air handling totally solved this issue. And this will be in my slide deck for as long as I work, because Don Roden, rest his soul, sent me not Don Roden, Don Rodebush, wrong Don. I was talking to Don Roden earlier today, so he's on my mind. But he sent me these, and just an example of the need to do physical inspections. And Chris, I know y'all have been doing a lot of drone inspections. Have you found anything with those that needed to be worked on?
Absolutely. In fact, we just replaced an ERI antenna in Birmingham and another one in Detroit. With the ends of the elements, it looked just about like that, and we had water inside.
Yep. And it's amazing how when you load something like that up with water, it doesn't seem to tune quite as nice as it used to. One on the left was an AM running 5 kilowatts, and it was still on the air when this picture was taken. Just for reference. The one on the right was also on the air. I'm not 100% sure what all we're looking at. I recognize a couple of ISO couplers. I see a disconnect that I wouldn't guarantee is rated for outdoor use on the tower itself. I did dutifully color over the ASR just so we're not identifying the guilty parties firsthand. But again, this is just one of those challenges that's a lot of extra crud to have in your room and not know what goes where. The one on the left, I was surprised that tower was still standing, but it's a testament to how guy wires, and I had a guy in Australia 20 years ago tell me the same thing. He goes, we had somebody strap half a stick of dynamite to our base insulator, blew the base insulator to smithereens. The tower just dropped 1.5 feet, sat on the pier, and kept on radiating. So, again, it's just a testament to how much the guy wires actually do to keep you vertical. Maintenance, this is stuff that most people already know. But the one thing that I have run into here and there, I had one of the competitors, and I was sitting in a session once where he said the cool thing about our liquid cooled transmitter is you never have to clean your air conditioner coils. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not true because you still got a heat exchanger. And anybody with a heat exchanger system knows that they don't get very efficient if you plug them up with cottonwood, as an example, or whatever. So, yeah, you still need to clean it. But, again, this is one of those things. People tell me how often should I replace, or ask how often should I replace fan filters, and I'll tell them flat out, I don't know. It depends on your site. Properly cleaned site with an air conditioner, you may replace the filters every 2 or 3 years. I've walked into sites that were so clean that they had taken the filters off the transmitter just to improve the airflow even more. So, it really depends. If you've got good double filtered exchange air with positive pressure, so you're not sucking dust in every crack and crevice, you could go a long while before you needed to swap out transmitter filters. Now, the room air filters, those might get changed on a much more regular basis. But again, one site to another site to another site, they're typically all going to be a little different. So you build the schedule based on your specific site. Like here at the house, we're in a fairly dusty environment where I live with a lot of pollen in the spring, and I've got several critters in the house, so the furnace air filters get changed every 3 months on a schedule, summer and winter. And that would vary. Other folks may only do it once a year. By the same token, if I walk into your site, or in this case, walk up to the front door of your site, and again, Shane took this picture too, but if anybody sends me a picture of a site where a sheet of plastic is what's keeping the rain off my transmitter, understand it will end up in a presentation somewhere. And this is an XR, it looks like a 6 from up front, and it was having some challenges, and I just can't imagine why. That's a corrugated steel building. You can see they do have a wooden sunshade built above the top, built above it. Looks like they just set some pallets up there almost. And that little red thing in the right-hand picture is the cooling for the entire room. So wrap your head around that for a little while. A little Walmart fan cooling a 5 kilowatt AM site. And again, they were wondering why it wouldn't make full power. So like I said, schedule based on site conditions. If you do have anything that's got the metal mesh filters instead of the pleated paper, don't just willy-nilly swap one for the other. Talk to the manufacturer because the airflow throughput is critical for a lot of gear. Now, we went from metal mesh to MERV 8, but again, I wouldn't just wholesale make that change without talking to the support team. If you do have metal mesh, you can wash them. Don't put them in while they're still wet. And yes, I've had that happen, or it wouldn't have ended up in a slide deck. By the same token, make sure that you spray the filters with filter coat, the sticky spray, because on their own, a metal mesh filter doesn't stop a whole lot of dust. It needs the sticky stuff. That's something else that a lot of people just don't think about. I've walked into several sites with metal mesh and pleated paper filters where you couldn't see the filter for the 1/4 inch of crud over the top of it. And I can guarantee you that those don't tend to move a lot of air. So again, something else that is easy to overlook. If you get in the upper Midwest up through Duluth or northern Wisconsin into the UP of Michigan, cottonwood season rolls around, you might be replacing air filters every 2 weeks for a couple of months. So that's something else that a lot of folks don't think about is seasonal changes. Okay, and there's an example. So those were 3 different sites taken in 3 states. Let's see, the one on the left was Duluth, Minnesota. The one in the middle was Superior, Wisconsin, and the one on the left was Saginaw, Michigan. And all taken in June of last year in cottonwood season. And the notable thing is every single one of those filters had been replaced within the previous 2 weeks. So that argues for a need for a little bit of better positive air pressure in the transmitter site, and definitely for, again, a seasonal filter replacement schedule. So, again, I can't set these schedules. They're going to be determined on your own physical site conditions. Everybody's heard me talk about the little FLIR cameras. I'm going to have to give this one away someday because they upgraded me to an iPhone. By the way, if anybody's got an iPhone, I apologize now, but a year and a half later, I'm still not a fan. And I think it's mostly just learning curve because I'm old and cranky. But the FLIR 1, and this is one of the very first ones, is it's the coolest thing ever. We did one of our weekly TTT sessions, Transmission Talk Tuesday sessions. I had Gary Cavell from Cavell Mertz on because he's a registered thermographer and actually knows about this stuff. And, but for what we want to do, you don't need to have an accurate number. I tell people, put an X inside the transmitter room door, stand on the X, put your FLIR camera, plug it into your phone, aim it at your breaker panel, and as long as the settings are the same every time, you'll get a picture that lets you know if you've got a relative change. Did something get warmer? As if you got a breaker that's getting noticeably warmer, that's a situation. And, I would guess that of the half dozen transmitter site fires that I know of that have had our equipment in the building, I know six. Let's see. Well, the one in Alaska was a bad, a loose connection on a 110 volt outlet. Two of the other ones were loose connections on circuit breakers. I think one of them was an actual circuit breaker failed. But every single one of them involves something that would have had to have gotten warmer over time. And if you'd had a monthly shot of the thermal reading of the electrical outlet or panel, you probably would have been able to notice that. So, those things right now, that FLIR, I bought a new one for my iPhone, and it was $255 US delivered, tax in and everything. So it's pretty cheap insurance. You can get cheaper ones again on Amazon. So I'm talking about the brand I know, but I'm not saying it's the only way to go about it. I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars on high-end gear, but for what we want to do, all you want's a relative reading. Did this get hotter than it was before? And I mean, those things to me, first transmitter site fire, it saves you. It'll be worth its weight in gold. By the way, if you walk into your transmitter and you take the back off to do some cleaning and you look down and see that, make sure you look up. And that's the kind of thing that, again, finding it before the fire is critical. And like this one, the guy that sent it to me said that the Bakelite that those terminals are mounted in was actually hot, like soft, meltable. I didn't even know Bakelite had a soft point. I thought it went from hard to crispy, but not a lot in between. Apparently there is. So that was cool. That was cool. It was cool they discovered it before the fire. Okay, so we talked about that a little bit already. Generator maintenance. The one thing that a lot of people do tend to overlook, especially with diesels, is fuel conditioning, and that's something that is critical. By the same token, if you've got a gas generator, like not natural gas, but actual petroleum gas, a lot of people don't think about the fact that E85 or the corn oil, ethanol-based fuels tend to really do a number on rubber fuel lines. And they'll gum up a carburetor and injectors and all that great stuff. So if you're running anything that runs gas, like all my small engines, I've switched to premium for my vehicle or the vehicles in the house because I've already had to replace all the fuel lines in my generator at home and my lawnmower. So that's something else to be aware of too. By the same token, if you've got like a lawn tractor or anything for yard work or maintenance at the shed or at the transmitter site, then it's keep an octane booster and a gas stabilizer in it, and don't use the corn stuff. But that's, again, personal thing. So there's your summary page right there for management. And I use the oil change as an analogy because a lot of owners and managers don't understand why you want to be out at the transmitter site cleaning up stuff when everything's working. But the analogy I use is, well, you change your oil before your engine seizes, right? This is the same thing, and that's the goal. You know, they do need to understand that getting spares and replacements overnight anymore is not as easy as it was even 2 years ago. But 20, 25 years ago, it was nothing for me to call somebody up on a weekend, have them run into the plant, grab a part, run out to the airport, and throw something Delta Dash to where it was going and have it there that day. TSA won't let you do that anymore. You can't ship unaccompanied parts, like basically buying them a seat on an airplane. Now, you can still charter planes, and there is air freight. And I mean, we've got the warehouse in Memphis on the FedEx grounds, so we can get stuff out next morning. But that assumes that we've got it on the shelf to begin with. So, you know, this is one of those things that, you know, it's like getting a dud tube. You're not getting a rebuilt tube anymore unless you already had a dud in Econco's tube library, as an example. You know, they don't have stock or rebuilds. So that's just something else to be aware of. So challenges, like I say, they're real, and you can tell I wrote this a year or two ago. They're still here a bit, but getting better fast. And that's cool, but the time to slack off on maintenance is absolutely not now. Because I had a guy call me up yesterday and he said, I need a 20 kilowatt. And I said, cool. And he goes, how fast can I get one? And I said, probably about 3.5, maybe 4 months. And he goes, well, you're doing better than the other guys, but that's still a long time to be off the air. So, you know, again, just pay attention to that stuff. All right, comments, questions, concerns, criticisms, all of the above. What I missed? What should we talk more about?
I got a couple things I could throw at you. One is we have run into unavailability of parts for some Nautel transmitters. For instance, in the XL, XR series, the contactor, the three-phase contactor for the power supply. And you know, you guys have used all your stock. When that happens, what do you guys do? You don't just say, well, that's not available anymore. What
Typically, no. So what happens is that customer service creates, and I'd mentioned JIRA, the engineering database before. Customer service will create a JIRA case, and that lights up a flag on one of the support engineers' computers that says, hey, we can't get this part. We're out of stock on this part. And purchasing told us they can't get any more. And so it's multiple, you know, because purchasing, what'll happen typically when a part goes into life, they'll send support and engineering a notice to say, hey, this part's out of life. If it's a current production product, support puts in a huge end-of-life buy for long-term support. Engineering puts in an end-of-life buy and starts the process to find the substitute. We do the same thing for the out-of-production stuff, but of course the priority is a little lower because, well, it's not something we're building right now. At any given point these days, we've got 70 parts a day that are become obsolete. So it's a huge and ongoing challenge, and it's getting worse. Used to be that I could pretty much guarantee that I'd have parts availability for any new design for 15 to 20 years. Now I'm lucky to get it for 5. So we've probably quadrupled the size of the engineering department dedicated only to subbing out parts. I'm not sure, did that answer the question or not quite?
It did. The thing that we've run into of late has been power supplies, these Meanwell supplies. They go EOL. Seem like they go EOL about the time that the ones in the transmitter give up.
Yeah, again, 5 years, yeah.
And so, you know, you guys have been really good about finding a substitute supply, but a lot of times the connector's different or whatever. So when we get the part, we don't just get the part, we get a service bulletin with the procedure
Yep.
to modify the transmitter to accept the new
Yeah.
part.
And I mean, that is the same NV series transmitters. The single board computer is on the 4th iteration, and 2nd or 3rd involve connector changes.
We've done some of that ourselves too. We've just gone out and found our own supplies, found our own connectors, done our own mods, and then we bought a stock of the supplies, so we have it ready, on our own. And that's not really that difficult to do. One thing I really like about NotPel is that you guys in your parts lists list the manufacturer and the manufacturer part number.
So I need you to put that in writing and send that to me, because the last edition of the handbook that I saw come out, the OEM part numbers are gone.
Really?
Now I've still
very
got
common.
access to the database, so I can look it up and I'll cheerfully give it to you. But yeah, send me a letter to say, I'll tell you what, I'll send you a copy of a VX transmitter manual so you can say, hey, this VX manual doesn't have the OEM parts. What's up?
Yeah, I want to send it back. Okay, one more question. Where's my Chicago transmitter? When do I get it? You can email me.
Oh, come on. I was going to look it up and share it with this. So, I mean, I don't mind, this is not proprietary information, but here's a good example. And let's see, I'm still screen sharing. So
See, we ordered it in December, so this will be a good test of what you just told us.
So well, I'm going to search on Krista, because Krista is my guru for all this stuff. And let's see here. Oops. Let's go by, actually just search by from. And Krista. It would help if I could type. It would help there. Come on, computer. There we go, Krista. All right, sales team quick view. So let's go here. Now there may be hidden rows in this, but let's do a quick, what's the call sign?
WPWX.
Yep. All right, so there we go. That actually, WPWX, Crawford. So they've got it down as late May. Do I have any hidden columns here? Don't see any. Usually, and target date was the 15th, or the 19th rather. So it looks like it's a week or two late, but not months late.
Okay, good. Thank
There you go. Like I said, I don't mind sharing stuff like that at all. I would much rather what goes on, but there is no man behind the curtain. It's just me frantically trying to figure stuff out.
So that's about 150 days from order, plus or minus.
Yep. And for what it's worth, actually, I should have left that open. Let's go back there real quick. So when this sheet came out about a year ago, the NV Light Series and the GV, and this one still says 20 weeks. Now, I can confirm that as of yesterday morning, we were being told 12. So it's come down 8 weeks in the past week and a half.
So what you're saying is you should have waited to order this until
you would have got it at the same length of time. Or not the same length of time, but yeah. I'll give you an example. So VX transmitters, which are showing, let's see, as 8 weeks right here, and this was last week, are now, I had one ordered for an off-air situation on Thursday and it shipped Tuesday. So we're down to a normal delivery of about 2 weeks on the VX, with a goal of having them on the shelf by the end of the month. So there you go. All right. Anything else, folks?
Thanks for lunch, Jeff.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Really
Oh, my
appreciate-
pleasure. Thank Amanda. Amanda did all the heavy lifting on that one. All I did was provide a credit card, but she gave me and I'm not sure if she kind of raised her eyebrows.
So, you guys are making any purchases, it's like maybe.
I have one client who has an older AM 10 kilowatt
Mhm.
and having trouble getting capacitors. for the modules that fit anywhere, so they got Nautels, he said he got Nautels last 3
Uh-huh.
to rebuild them. And everybody's having this problem getting an electrolytic capacitor.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
is it a bleak future, or is
It's
there relief coming, or?
it's going to be an ongoing problem for a while. You remember when I showed you that lead time sheet that Vichy, which is where we get those, because those are Cornell Dubelier parts, and they're running about 60 weeks on the lead time. So we do keep looking for them. I think that there will probably be a sub located at some point, but yeah, it's again, it goes into the engineering database. They go through, and so just to give you a little insight to the procedure, it's not just some guy flipping through the Mauser catalog until he finds something with the same specs. Number one, it's got to match specs that typically aren't published, like ripple current, physical space, hole diameter, all that great stuff. But after that, we've got to vet the vendor against our ISO, our standards requirements, both for, and I'll give you a prime example. Last week, I had a customer call me and say, weirdest thing ever, I've got this new HD multicast. It wasn't running up right, and customer service said I've got a counterfeit FPGA IC. And I said, yeah, on average, probably 5% of the parts we get in the door, even with the vetting we do, are found to be counterfeit. It's a huge industry. So, I mean, we've gone to, typically we mil-spec most of our inputs, which you'd think would be a lot better inspection, but it's actually a lot less rigorous. And if there is any anomaly at all, then we 100% inspect everything. So, and again, when you're looking for a substitute part, it's not just the part itself that's got to match all the requirements, but the sources we buy it from. And even then, we can assume that some of them. One example, we got a load of 1 microfarad 25 volt caps. Nothing, the little bitty metal cans, nothing much to them. And they were popping in test. And so somebody got a little creative, took a Dremel tool, cut the thing in half, and discovered that there was a tiny little 1 microfarad 5 volt cap soldered across the leads inside of an empty can. So that's the kind of thing you run into these days. And you can just picture somebody paying a whole bunch of people $1 a month to sit around soldering these little tiny capacitors in to save half a cent per component. So, yep, welcome to the world. It's interesting, to put it bluntly. This is why I jump on the bandwagon so hard when it comes to virtualization and building stuff in software, because that means that if I can get a hardware platform that's stable, then and change the features in the software, I don't have to continually search for new components. I just got to keep paying the code writers. So, the pluses and minuses to everything, though. All right.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the lunch again and for doing this for us.
Well, my pleasure. I have a little more fun with this stuff than I should, and there's a good reason that we don't invite too many of senior management when I start talking. But on that note, certainly everybody have a great day, and we'll talk to you all next time.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
All right, see y'all.